Well, hey there, everybody. Everybody all right? So far, so good, right? We haven't even begun yet, so it's great to be with you. I'm telling you, how many of you have been to two or three of these? Have you been to these Storytelling Live? Okay. Well, thank you for coming back. Thanks for taking a chance on me today. It's fun to be introduced as my father's son. You know, my dad, as was mentioned by Crystal, made a living for a while with a guitar on his back and a handful of record albums under his arm, and he would knock on doors in college towns and try to get in and sell a record album, and if he sold a lot of them, we'd have a lot to eat that night, and if he sold a few of them, we'd have a little bit to eat that night. But these days, I hardly travel anywhere without somebody coming up and saying, "Hey, are you Marvin Payne's boy?" That happens to me all the time. And they talk about how they bought a record album from him when they were kids in college. I remember playing a big sort of multi-artist show one time, a Christmas show. And during intermission, I came down to the edge of the stage to tune my guitar, and a guy came up and said, "Hey, are you Marvin Payne's boy?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, your dad knocked on my girlfriend's door when I was in college and sold her a record album, and I wanted to buy one, but I didn't have any money. So your dad gave me a record album and said, 'Pay me when you can. So here's $20 for your dad.'" that was 30 years after the event, you know. I gave that money to my dad, and he muttered something about inflation, and we went and got a pizza. My son, when he was 12 years old, came to me asking about the people through whom the teaching of his life came down. He was talking about me and my dad and my dad's dad. And the problem is when you're my son and you ask a question like that, you get a song. So I wrote him a song about my dad and my dad's dad. My dad, who was an itinerant folk singer. When I was a little kid, I thought the only thing you could be for a living, you could either be a worker man or a bander boy. A worker man was a guy who had a job, and a bander boy was a guy who made music for a living. My dad was a bander boy, and I guess I grew up to be a bander boy too. My granddad was a kid in the Mexican colonies, and when Pancho Villa rode through town, he and the rest of the folks in town had to leave the colonies and come north on a midnight train all the way to Utah, settled in Sevier County. And my granddad, from that time to the time he died, referred to himself as a severe pain. That's the... Anyway, this is a song I wrote for my boy, and I thought I'd start off with it today. My granddad came from Mexico when bloody revolution there had come, and the cattle car that brought him here drew a line between those battles and my home. And I've seen it all in photographs, in a book, a box of papers, and the way the old man cried, laying out each thing he got from God in a line between the railroad and the mountain where he died. My father was a bander boy, and he sang in your apartment in a dream. And the ringing of his old guitar drew a line between that music man and me. And I've heard it all on 45s, in a song, in his journal, in his fingers on my hair, laying out each thing he got from God in a line between the blessings and the barber chair. From a father to his son, for one to one more step, in the way the stories run. All that heaven gets to secret ground, where it all comes down in a line, in a line. Well, I'm the father of my own son now, and the line is running through him and away. And away it all will go from here. That's between a heavenly father and his boy. So a father prays for courage, and a father prays for courage in his son, that the boy might fix his spirit on the line between a family and its home. From a father to his son, from one to one more step in the way the stories run. All that heaven gets to sacred ground, but it all comes down in a line, in a line, in a line that runs through me and through my father, in a line that runs through Leland and on through Albert, in a line that runs through Heber and through George and on through Brigham and through Oliver and Peter and James and John, in a line, in a line. Thank you. Are we mostly from around here? Are we mostly from town? Where are you from? Right here. Okay. Arizona? Really? You might. Anybody? We're from Missouri. You're from Missouri? Is that how you say it now? Well, that's all right. Are you visiting on a trip? Live here now? Visiting. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for making this a part of your visit. It's easy to get in trouble around here. I discovered that last time I came. Listen, the way people talk in Tennessee is just the most beautiful thing in the world. And I found myself kind of adopting it a little bit. You know, I found myself kind of putting it on. I couldn't help it. I'm up here and somebody asked me out if the weather was good outside. And I said, I actually think it's fixing to rain. That's what I said. I said, I think it's fixing to rain, and I got called on it. Somebody in the audience came up to me after that and said, is that the way you really talk, or are you just putting that on because you're here? Oh, I felt like I was guilty of cultural appropriation, you know? And so when I came back, I thought, I'm going to try to avoid that. I'm just going to talk like myself. I'm going to try to, you know? But then my wife and I went to breakfast this morning, and there were these guys talking about fishing, and I couldn't help it. I found myself even just in conversation with my wife falling back down that hole, fixing to do this and fixing to do that. So I don't know what I'm fixing to do here, but it's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to sing you a song, tell you a story right now about a little trip that same son and I took. We were on a road trip one time. He was just a tiny little guy. And we had to stop for gas somewhere. And so he waited in the car. I filled up the tank, and then we both went in the gas station. He got an ice cream cone or something, and I got a magazine. And on the front of the magazine was a guy with a great big beard, and he had a big wool cap pulled down over his eyebrows, and he had enormous boots on and a big coat and a backpack, and he was in the snow, and he had gear all over him trying to get through that snow. And I read the article about who it was on the cover. His name was Eric Weinmeier. Eric Weinmeier was the first blind man to summit Mount Everest. He did it in 2001. And since then, he has kept up that not only adventurous spirit, kayaking the entire 277 some odd miles of the river at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, instituting programs that take veterans on summiting expeditions to give them a chance at leadership in the way that they sometimes haven't experienced since they were serving, right? All kinds of amazing stuff that Eric Weihenmayer still does. But of course, then he was merely the only blind man to ever summit Mount Everest, right? And I read that story. It's a remarkable story. And on the inside of the magazine, there was a photograph of Eric Weihenmayer and his wife standing there. And whereas on the front of the magazine, he had been, again, that picture had been taken on Mount Everest, right? Again, geared up for the rigors of that mountain. The picture on the inside of the magazine showed him in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and no beard, and no hat. It's like a summer day. And his wife was dressed in the same way. And I thought, as I looked at that picture, I thought, that's probably how they were dressed most of the time they planned that expedition, And I thought about all the things with which we enter, the things into which we enter with such nonchalance in our lives, before we're actually out there on the mountain looking like that. And this song started to form itself, And I don't know if you're a kind of person who writes songs. I'm the kind of person who writes songs. And I always, you learn something about the songwriting process. Once you're into it, the song is kind of pulling in one direction and you're pulling in another direction. There's a thing you want the song to be when it grows up, and there's a thing the song kind of wants to be. I know that sounds like gobbledygook, but it's kind of how it is, right? And this song was kind of pulling in a direction. I called my dad, and I talked to my dad about the song. He's a songwriter too, and I said, that Everest song, he had heard the song by then. I said, that Everest song? He said, yeah. I said, I think I know what that song's about. And he said, do tell, what do you think that song's about? I said, I think that song's about being married. It wound up, I think, being about any of those things that we enter into, again, with some nonchalance, but that wind up shaping our lives, being the things that are of enormous importance to us, trails that hold great difficulty and great reward, all those kinds of things. So this is Everest. Remember when we planned this trip? It's easy in the summertime not to feel the freezing wind, easy not to fear this climb, and simple in the living room not to hear the radio crackle out of range of home and lose the signal in the ice and snow. And they cheered us when they learned that we would come here, and I suppose their prayers are thicker than we know. But it's awfully hard to hear them through the whispers of the ghosts of fallen climbers in the snow as up we go. We could have chosen, and we almost did, a life of comfort in the world so wide, but instead we closed our eyes and leapt, you and me, against a mountainside. And I could never hope to match your mind. You've come to trust my steady hand, and hanging here upon a frozen wall, the journey never turns out like you planned. But I'm glad for a companion here to lean on. It gives me twice the hope that we might make it through. Like 2 teaspoons fill an ocean twice as quickly, and like 2 snowflakes might stand out against the blue. That's me and you. So well, you can go and tell your friends back home how you did what you had come to do, and they may hang up on your every word, but they'll never feel the cold like you, and what you tell them might just fill them up with a longing they're afraid to speak. Perhaps they realize the thoughts you stir remain a longing till they're on the peak, and the trip back down can wait another moment. You can make your body linger if you try, and know that no one knows the sound of hallelujah echo ever off of nothing but the sky, like you and I, like you and I, la 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 la. Flat up the bottom, do do the beats inside on. Thank you. I think if I were to write that song now, it'd be about raising cats. I look back there at my wife and daughter. They're back. We welcomed. Is welcomed even the right word? We started feeding a mother cat that walked into our backyard, and 7 cats later. Yeah, right? Yeah. We became TNR people, people who trap those cats and take them to the Humane Society, and they fix them, and then they come back and live in our yard. We like the cats, but boy, yeah. Talk about Everest. I like Eric Weinmeier. I like people who do remarkable things, who stand up against amazing odds. And another one of those guys I think about a lot, is a guy named Jerry Linenger. Jerry Linenger is still around, but he was an American astronaut. He spent 5 months aboard the space station Mir. And he got that gig, got aboard that space station. It was him and 2 cosmonauts, 2 Russian cosmonauts. Now, the space station Mir, your cell phone has more computing power than the space station Mir had. It was kind of a hunk of junk. Long before they let its orbit deteriorate and landed it in the Pacific Ocean, right? Which is where it is now. It's at the bottom of the ocean. People had some fun with that, when they finally did let the space station Mir's orbit deteriorate and land in the ocean. Taco Bell got in on the act. Taco Bell put an enormous bullseye target in the middle of the ocean. It's not a big piece of something. I don't know what they used, but they had this enormous bullseye in the middle of the ocean. And on the bullseye it said, if Mir lands here, everyone gets a free taco. I was hoping and praying. But no free tacos for anybody. But while the space station Mir was in outer space, there was a fire aboard that space station. And Jerry Linenger and his fellow cosmonauts all thought they were going to die, but they didn't. In fact, they came home safely. And Jerry Linenger wrote a book. He wrote a book called Off the Planet, which I haven't read. But I did hear him talk about it on the radio many years ago. And hearing him talk about outer space and the wonders of outer space gave rise to a little song for Jerry Linenger. In fact, it gave rise to a couple songs. And I'm going to play them both for you, but not at the same time. This is the first one. 100 days in outer space, I sail the starry sea in my $1,000 PJs with my black and white TV. Baby, no one speaks my language, and I cannot drink their tea. And the air all smells of cosmonauts. It's near too much for me. But I watch my baby planet hanging blue inside its bubble full of air. And it turns there into silence and my mind can see you turning there. Baby, side after day. Now the sunrise on the Rockies I could cover with a dime, and the pyramids of Egypt passed me for the 1,000th time. And 18,000 miles an hour up the universe we climb, and I do my bit for science while my spirit burns and burns. I'm riding in a Winnebago, and there aren't any doors, and I pace and pace the ceiling. I assume you pace the floors. This has changed me for forever. I'm a far, far better man, but I wake up from my sleeping and I cannot find your hand, 'cause I'm a so that we play that lights out of I was singing like that one time in front of an audience, and a kid came up afterward and said, you know, if you practiced more, you wouldn't forget the words so often. I know you're being careful with each other out there and with masks on. I think we can do this even with masks on. Just follow me down a little bit. I'll sing something, you sing it back to me. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Sa la 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 la. Sa da 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 da. Da 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 da. Fly da 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 da. Sa da 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 da. So da 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 da. Well, no. Oh, baby, when this trip is over, and it will be over soon, I'll breathe air I didn't make, and I will gaze up at the moon, and I will walk upon the grasses, I will eat soup from a spoon, and I will not float away when you reach out for me. So reach out for me. Galaxies are not enough without a hand to hold. Let me know I'm not alone. Warm me up from orbit's cold. Do not mention that it's changed me. I'm a far, far better man, but I wake up from my sleeping and I cannot find your hand, 'cause I'm a space man, oh man. For baby, about the day today. So well, thank you. Thanks very much. I wrote that song without knowing a lot about Jerry Lineage. I just heard that in one radio interview, but I was just captured. You know, I think space exploration is one of the most visionary things we do as human beings, and I was captured enough to write a song. Later on, I work on a radio show. That's kind of my, you know, in addition to traveling and telling stories and singing songs, I have a radio show called The Appleseed. And The Appleseed brings to the airwaves a lot of the stories of mostly my colleagues, not even as many of my stories, but most of the people that you see here on this stage are all on that show. And it's such a pleasure to work on. And every once in a while, my team of producers will give me, I don't even know what they're thinking, but I just call it a cool gift, you know? And one time, one of my producers learned that I liked the story of Jerry Linenger so much that she called him up and got a radio interview with him for me. And I just saw his name on the docket of people that I was going to interview on the radio. And good heavens, it was like I was just like a fanboy, you know? But I got more of his story, more of the story of that fire, for example, right? Turns out that on the Mir space station, there was something going wrong just about every day. And just about every day, the alarms would all go off on the Mir space station, the alarms that let you know that if you don't fix whatever's broken, everybody's going to die, right? So it had become kind of commonplace for these alarms to go off. And these alarms went off one day when they were up there, and they thought, oh, good heavens, well, let's go, do whatever we need to do, trip the breaker, or I try to say trip the breaker, what do I know, right? But let's go figure out what we got to do. And so they kind of tooled through the space station to the appropriate module. He says it was about the size of a school bus, this module of the space station. And there was an enormous flame shooting out of the wall. Now, I don't know what you do when your space station catches fire, I mean, you can't very well just gather the family and meet at the appointed place on the curb and call 911, That's what we learned to do in elementary school when the house caught on fire. But what do you do when your space station catches on fire? Well, Jerry Linenger and these two cosmonauts found themselves rushing into the flames to figure out how to extinguish the fire. Now, the happy ending is that they did it. They did it. They didn't die. But Jerry Linenger thought he was going to die, and as he rushed into that module filled with flame, he heard himself shout, "I'm sorry, John." He didn't have time right then to even sort of suss that out, what he had meant by that. Well, John was his little boy. John was just a little tiny guy, 18 months old, back on Earth. And Jerry Linenger realized that because he was going to die, as he was sure he wasn't going to get to communicate to his son all of the things that he believed and thought and loved and hoped. And so from that moment on, he began to write a letter every day to his 18-month-old son. He found a place between his duties in the space station, floating in space, to pull a laptop to himself and type out a letter that contained something of what he hoped and something of what he believed and something of what he thought. And he would send that letter to the mission control for that mission, which of course was Moscow. And then that letter would finally get to the boy. 18 months old, he couldn't even read those letters. Many, many years later, he was able to read those letters and treasures them. And those letters have been compiled into a book called Letters from Mir. Well, Jerry Linenger told me a little bit about that book and a little bit about those letters. And it was right at the same time as, you when you do what I do for a living, sometimes you get commissions, right? You get asked to compose stories or write songs for people. And I had been asked to write a story for a gathering of young people between the ages of 12 and 18 years old, who were gathering to learn about family history, about genealogy, right? And I was to write a sort of a theme song, as it were, for this event that all these kids were going to go to, learning about the stories, the things that had been passed down to them, right? The teaching of their lives. And so I set myself to write this song with that conversation with Jerry Linenger fresh in my mind, that impulse of his to spend every remaining day on the space station Mir writing down these things for his son to read. And this is the song that wound up going out. There's something in your eyes, something that you see in me for good, something you'd help me see There's something in your eyes, something that you'd teach me if you could, like you're watching out for me. There's something in your face, pointing to a future bright and fair, like if I look, I'll see it too. There's something in your face, like there is a treasure waiting there. When I turn around and reach for you, and you left a story, it's gonna light my way. I feel you around me, like the sand around the shore. I'm gonna find you, like it's the dark of night, and every story is one of a million stars. There's something in my heart, something like a promise I can keep. And now I see there's something in my heart, something strong and steady, something deep. Feels like family, and I'll rise up and I'll turn my heart to you. I'll turn my heart to you as you turn to me. You left a story, it's gonna light my way. I feel you around me, like the sand around a shore. And I'm gonna find you, we'll bring each other home. And every story is one of a million stars. Every story is one of a million stars. La, 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 la. First stories I ever learned in my life were Bible stories. We had, in my house, a collection of cassette tapes. And on those cassette tapes were Bible stories. And they were read for us by Burl Ives. Burl Ives reading Bible stories, right? And it was marvelous. My parents, who wanted for us a week that looked like 6 days of regular stuff and Sunday that was sort of a day set apart, kind of a Sabbath set apart, right? Had this box of stuff that we were only ever to interact with on Sundays. And those Burl Ives tapes were in there, right? So on Sundays, they would unlock the box and the Burl Ives tapes would come out. And that's how I got acquainted, really, in my life with the Bible stories that became a part of my childhood and, of course, later part of my adulthood. The thing about the Bible is when you experience those stories later on, they kind of blow up for you, right? And they get bigger. They mean different things. And so it was that when I was a grown-up and read the story of Jacob and Esau, the twins, I thought of my brother and me. When we were little kids, we hated each other's guts. I don't know if you got a sibling like that, or a sibling with whom it was like that at one time, but we hated each other's guts. And I remember one time we went on a hike with my dad. We lived in the mountains at the base of a little cove of mountains on three sides. And we wanted to go to a hike together. We had a limited time because my dad wanted to get home in time to watch a PBS documentary about Buddy Holly. And who wouldn't, right? I mean, come on, let's be serious, right? So we had a limited time. We started hiking up to a beautiful waterfall, Horsetail Falls, it's called. Water cascading 150 feet from its crest to the creek below. And I stayed next to my dad most of the time as we hiked along. But my little brother, he's just a mountain goat, you know. He's jumping over rocks and hiding behind stuff, and we'd see him, and then we wouldn't see him, and then we'd see him, and then we wouldn't see him, and then we'd see him, and then we wouldn't see him. I was hiking with my brother. Well, the trail was going to go all the way to the crest of the waterfall. Almost before you saw the waterfall coming, you'd be standing there seeing the water cascading over the lip of those falls. And then the trail would take you right to that lip, and you'd look out over the valley. And that was the view we were hoping for, right? Well, we got to a rise that was near the falls. We could hear them, we couldn't see them. And my little brother got up over the lip of that hill, that rise. And a moment later, we heard a blood-curdling scream. We scrambled up over the rise ourselves, and we couldn't see my brother. And we looked and looked and looked, and finally looked in the place we hadn't thought to look, which is right at the lip of the falls. My brother, as it turns out, had fallen into the creek, and he had flopped like a fish down that creek right to the lip of the falls. If you ask him, he said he felt something push him down under the water, and then a current threw him out onto the other side of the creek. So there he was, on the very lip of the falls, on the other side of the creek. His knees pulled up to his chest, soaking wet and sobbing. And I remember watching my dad who put his arm on my shoulder and pushed me down on the rocks and said, "You stay here." And then I watched him as he walked across that creek. Right at the edge of the waterfall was the only place he could get good purchase to get across the creek and take my brother in his arms. And then he couldn't carry my brother in his arms back across the creek safely, so I watched my brother put his hand in my dad's hand and walk across the creek, trembling, shaking, sobbing. Well, they got safely back across the creek. My brother didn't die. And we walked down the trail, trying to make jokes and sing songs to one another, take our minds off the near tragedy we all just experienced. Got back down to the car finally, drove home, told Mom the story. Joe got in some dry clothes, and then we sat down to watch that documentary about Buddy Holly. And I sat there next to my brother on the bed, my brother whose guts I hated so much. And I'm telling you, it got pretty ferocious between us. You know, I was in those days the fat kid in school. And what that meant in close combat with my brother was that if I could just get close enough to land on him good, game over. Fight mine, right? So my brother, my skinny little brother, he decided to counter by just becoming a dead shot with anything he picked up. You know, he could bean me with a library book at 30 paces. I remember running through the house and into the backyard, my brother hot on my heels, and turning around and seeing my brother winding up with my cat. And if you've never seen a cat coming at you in the air, that's a heck of a thing to see. I was a fat kid in school, but I was also agile. And you don't want to get in a fight with an agile fat guy. I just got out of the way, and the cat bounced harmlessly off of a loosely hung chain link fence and ran off into the horse pasture next door. Perfectly safe, but never to be seen again. And suddenly there I am sitting next to that brother watching that documentary about Buddy Holly. And if you know anything about a documentary about Buddy Holly, what it is it's an hour of Buddy Holly singing, "Well, that'll be the day when I die. When Cupid shot his dart, he shot it at your heart." It's a love song, right? But for me, that line, "That'll be the day when I die," just made me want to put my hands over my ears. That cut a little too close to the bone that day, the day that I had almost lost that old enemy that I suddenly realized how much I loved, right? We watched TV in those days on the sofa bed. We'd pull out the sofa bed, and us little boys would just lie across the sofa bed and watch television. And I climbed underneath the sofa bed and put my hands over my ears. And I could still hear Buddy Holly singing, "That'll Be the Day I Die." And so I ran back into my parents' bedroom, the furthest place in the house from the television, and I could still hear it. And I realized again that as much as I hated that brother of mine, I loved him. Well, we're good friends now. When I read that story of Jacob and Esau, it reminded me of the old animosity between Jacob and Esau, who hate each other's guts. And the animosity between them grows so ferocious that Jacob leaves home, and he does it to the sound of his brother saying, "I'll kill you if you ever come back." And he goes away for a long time. He's gone for decades. And he makes a fortune, and he gets married, and he gets married again, and somehow 2 other women get in there somehow, and suddenly there are all these kids and essentially 4 wives, right? And then Jacob, for reasons that were not even really given very clearly, decides to go back home. And he's so sure that all of that animosity is going to be alive and well between he and his brother that he sends scouts and gifts before he goes himself to meet his old enemy. Puts his favorite wife in a safe place. And the other 3, just right on out front there somewhere, But Esau comes out, and again, for reasons we're not even given in Scripture, embraces his brother, kisses him, and welcomes him home. And their old father, Isaac, is still alive and gets to meet all his grandkids before he dies. And when he does pass on, those 2 old enemies bury him as friends. And I think what a gift for old Father Isaac to see that reconciliation before he passes on. Now listen, I'm just telling you. Statistically speaking, in a group this size, there are probably some people who hate each other's guts. And this is a song for all of us, right? A song about 2 estranged brothers who come home for the funeral of their father. It's been 20 years since I've seen your face, and I wondered if you'd have me home. I have wandered far, but not alone. Meet my family, gazing dazed upon this place. Brother, this is where we grew. There the field where long you toiled, and here the house where blood first boiled, and a road that sent me running far from you. And blue heaven cool us down, bear away our holy load. Let us turn to sacred ground, and let us walk a brother's road. Let us walk a brother's road. La, 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 la. Is that the scar I left you then? You know it's folded now beneath deep lines. You still smell of fields and pines, and I suppose I smell of where I've been. And I came when first I heard. Sure seems funny how I shed no tear. I guess I figured he died just to bring me here, to bring me home like a wounded bird. Blue heaven cooled us down, bear we our holy load. Let us turn to sacred ground, and let us walk a brother's road. Let us walk a brother's road. Mm-hmm. lift his head, and let us lay him gently in the ground. Oh, so softly, softly, like the sound of everything he ever said to us, and like my mind closed up to you, let us close the earth now over him. He's returning now to where we've been, like I'm returning here anew. Blue heaven cooled us down, bear we our holy load. Let us turn to sacred ground, and let us walk our brother's road. La 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 la. Thank you. My brother lives in Knoxville now, where he teaches at UT, and when we come to town, we visit him. And I was sitting at a table around midnight. We were sharing a pizza not too many years ago, and we hadn't shared that story with each other of his long ago waterfall experience, not for many years. And it was a foundational experience for both of us in our childhoods. And I said to my brother, I said, "Do you remember the waterfall? You remember almost going over the waterfall when you were a kid?" And he said, yeah, I do. Were you there? Well, since then, we've tried to be a little more careful, sharing the stories of our family one with another. Not too long ago, 2017, the year of the eclipse. You remember the eclipse? Anybody there? Did you go see the eclipse? My word, I mean, I knew that was going to be cool. I didn't know it was going to be like one of the 2 or 3 coolest things I'd ever experienced in my life, right? Well, there was a storytelling festival formed in Idaho around that event, and they invited some of us out there, and I was standing on stage, and in the audience was a little girl, a little, maybe 7 years old, her hair pulled back in a little ballerina bun, you know? And I started my set with a song about dancing. And I started the song by saying, "I'm really not much of a dancer." And when I said that little girl in the 3rd or 4th row, she stood up and she said, "Anyone can be a dancer if only you believe in yourself." Yeah, right? Yeah. And with those words ringing in my head, you know, we came home from that event, and as a family, we auditioned for a local Shakespeare play. I mean, I still wasn't comfortable dancing, but I thought, maybe we could do a Shakespeare play together. Now, this is not too weird for my family. My wife and daughter run a Shakespeare company for little kid actors. In fact, they're done with rehearsal now, but they had rehearsal this morning that our son led because we're here. And imagine this. I mean, these are actors, the youngest little actors in the Shakespeare company are sometimes 3 years old, right? So actors from 3 to 18. That's these kids. That's his company, right? Right now they're doing a production of King Lear, and they're doing a production of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is all little girls. It's all little girls, so they're calling it Julia Caesar, and it's fantastic. And so doing a Shakespeare play is not so weird. It's just weird for me, you know. I just feel like I don't have the hard drive space for that anymore, you know. But we auditioned for the Scottish play. You know, I'm not supposed to say the name of that play out loud, but we auditioned for a production of the Scottish play, and my wife was cast as First Witch, and our son and daughter were cast as Malcolm and Donalbain. And I just wanted to be like third Scottish lord from the left, right? That's what I wanted to be. But I was cast as Macduff. I know, those of you who went, oh, you know that Macduff is the hero of the piece. or at least let's say that, right? So I was cast as Macduff, and that was, I mean, I was delighted, but like I say, I didn't think I had the hard drive space anymore to memorize all those lines. I mean, I'm getting on, and all the other guys that were casting this show were half my age, these kind of hotshot sort of self-styled Shakespeare scholars, or that's how they looked on themselves, And they would come to rehearsals and they would make jokes from Shakespeare's plays that I didn't get. My wife got them, and she would say they're telling those jokes pretty badly, But I didn't even get the jokes, right? And trying to memorize my lines for the Scottish play, I would go on these long walks in the morning. I would go on these long walks way before dawn. I'd get up and I'd put my headphones in where I had recorded my lines. And I would walk through our neighborhood saying these lines. I would walk through our neighborhood saying these Shakespeare lines. And I had some adventures when I was out there way, way early in the morning, I'm walking at 5 in the morning, saying lines to myself, saying lines to myself, saying lines to myself. And suddenly, a kid on his bike on the way to, I don't know, football practice or something, just pulls up right past me, and right as he gets level with my ear, he just says, "Good morning," which is not, I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying good morning to somebody, but at 5 in the morning, when you think you are alone in the world, and suddenly right in your ear, you hear somebody say good morning. I mean, I jumped out of my skin, and you respond by, you feel like you have to respond, but you don't want to sound like you got scared really bad, right? So you use all of your faculties to sort of channel your good morning back into sort of a normal tone, which makes it sound even weirder, right? So he says, good morning, and I say, good morning. No, and he goes, right. But I realized that first one didn't go very well, so I do it again. So he says good morning, and what it sounds like for me is good morning. I had adventures like that. Maybe that doesn't sound like very much of an adventure, but it was an adventure for me. And one morning I'm out walking at 5 in the morning, and a car pulls up next to me, boom, and stops. And I look, and it's like a SUV, and the window rolls down. And a woman on the passenger side, which is the side I'm on, she leans out and she puts her elbow up on the thing, and she looks at me. And I approach the car because I think they want to say something to me. And then I see her hand point directly at my face, holding something. And my life flashes before my eyes because I'm just waiting for that gun to go off. But what I see instead is whatever it was in her hand just goes flying past my head and lands on the front porch because it's not a gun, it's a newspaper. She's doing her newspaper around in the morning, So it was a traumatic time for me, memorizing my lines for the Scottish play. And not just am I trying to memorize lines, but I also have to memorize sword fights too, right? We've got sword fight blocking, and we run and we parry and we thrust and we spin, and it just breaks me in half, In the big fight between the tyrant and Macduff at the end of the play, they fight and they parry and they spin and they thrust, and then they kind of fall apart, and I'm supposed to have lines, I'm supposed to say, "Thou bloodier tyrant than terms can give thee out," but I say, "Thou give me a minute." I mean, it's that kind of thing. That's how these rehearsals are going pretty much every day, and I think that I'm absolutely going to ruin this play. I'm sure of it. And then we get to dress rehearsal, and at dress rehearsal, I find myself walking up into the wings. Now, the theater where we're doing this play is this beautiful, enormous outdoor stone amphitheater. They've got these all over the country. They were built during the Depression, right? These beautiful stone amphitheaters. This one is in Provo, Utah, where I live, and it's called the Castle. This beautiful amphitheater, these honey-colored stones, seating for 800 people. You can stand up there and look out over the entire valley. This theater built by our fathers' in a time when they built this place and then brought their families to be uplifted by the entertainments that they would see there on that stage. And I walk up into the wings of that stage because I want to watch the scene where the tyrant sends his thugs to destroy Macduff's family, right? And I'm standing there in the wings, and I walk up into the wings, and I find all those hotshot young guys up there, all those guys who make bad jokes about Shakespeare and who think they're, I find all these guys that I have hitherto looked on as my rivals, right? And I find myself standing among them, as my kinsman. And I realize there they are, for the same reason that I am, to look on stage and be captured by this moment of theater that we've created together. These young guys who, while I'm walking at 5 in the morning and getting scared by newspapers and guys on the way to football practice, are walking around campus just hoping for a few minutes between classes to memorize their lines. They've got their scripts in their backpacks rolled up in a way that they can just grab them and read them as they walk from class to class. And they, too, think they're going to wreck the show. But together, somehow, we create something, you know? And as I stand there in the wings, it begins to rain. And I walk out onto the stage in that blessed, beautiful rain. And I get to say to our son, who is Malcolm in tonight's performance, let us rather hold fast our mortal swords and like good men bestride our downfall and birth them. I get to say that, those beautiful words of Shakespeare's, to members of my family that I care about. And I'm just taken by the beautiful experience it is to do that show. Well, the final fight comes. And I shout, turn, hellhound, turn! And he does turn, and we close, and there are thrusts and parries and spins. And finally, because it's blocked this way, I knock him to the ground, and he looks up at me as I come in to strike the death blow. And I see not the face of the Scottish tyrant, but the face of my fellow actor, Archie, looking up at me. And you know what he's doing? He's breathing heavy, and he's saying with his face, just give me a second. This is really taking a lot out of me. And I look at him as if to say, it's taking a lot out of me too, man. We're brothers. And then I do drag him off stage and cut off his head. But and I take him off stage and I cut off his head. And as I do that, we're off stage. Nobody can see us. And we embrace each other, you know. And I back away from that embrace. And I look up at the sky and I say, anyone can be a dancer if only you believe in yourself. We finish that show, and we go get in the car. Everybody's going to go to grab a pancake or something at Denny's, and my wife and I get in the car, and I can just hear my bones creak as I get into the car. You know? And she sits next to me, and she looks at me, and she knows how hard this has been for me. And so she quotes to me not Shakespeare, but Tennyson. She says, we are not now that strength that moved heaven and earth, right? That which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to find, to seek, to strive, and not to yield. What a gift that was for me. And we drive away from that beautiful old amphitheater. And I think about the people who built that place. And I think about the way stories and songs have come so often to our rescue. And I think about when that place was built and the sorts of stories and songs that might have come to the rescue of the people who built it. It was built in 1938, finished in 1938, the year of a resurgence in popularity of a song that may have been sung on that stage as my father's fathers brought their families to be uplifted during a dark, hard time. That song by the immigrant composer Irving Berlin, God Bless America, Land That I Love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. That's a song that people may have been saved by as they came. And another song that they may have been saved by was that song written just a year later by Yip Harburg and Harold Arlen. That song filled with such imagination and color and life and hope at the end of a hard, dark time. The song that goes, when all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble to the ground, heaven opens a magic lane When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane to a place beyond the sun, just a step beyond the rain. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, dreams come true, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? And the tag. If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? These beautiful songs and stories that come in times of darkness and hardship to save our lives. What a pleasure it is to be together, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me. It's time now for a commercial. I do have CDs for sale out there, and I would love it so much if you took some home. I always like to say that they make great coasters in sets of 4. What a delight it's been for me to be with you. Thank you so much.